My name is Jack Allen, and I will be your moderator for today. Joining us are Sandeep Patney and Chip Childers. Sandeep Patney is the co-founder and vice president of systems at CumuLogic. Prior to CumuLogic, he has spent more than 11 years at Goldman Sachs in various infrastructure roles and as an application infrastructure architect for risk technology. Chip Childers is the vice president of product strategy of CumuLogic. Chip's previous role was as chief architect of SunGard's cloud service offerings. He also served as the first vice president of Apache Cloud Stack for the Apache Software Foundation. Throughout our presentation today, we encourage you to submit questions using the questions pane on GoToWebinar. We will answer questions live at the end of the presentation. Please keep in mind that all participants are in listen-only mode. We are recording today's session, and you will email a link of the recording tomorrow and post links on the CumuLogic website. Let's get started. We'll kick off today's webinar with Chip Childers.
Hey everybody, thanks for joining today. We're looking forward to the opportunity to present the CumuLogic's MongoDB-as-a-Service solution to you all. So what we're going to do today is do two things. So first, I'm going to walk through a few slides that will describe the product, its features, and how it fits into your environment and some of its capabilities. And then I'll hand off to Sandeep, who's going to dive into the product itself and walk you through a demo. And then, as Jack said, we'll take questions near the end. So if we step back a little bit, CumuLogic actually has a broad portfolio of functions that are available via our platform. Now, we'll be very focused on MongoDB as a service, but fundamentally, though, CumuLogic's platform is actually about how do you deliver a number of different modular capabilities, usually in conjunction with an infrastructure as a service platform that include relational databases, NoSQL databases, caches, load balancing, message queues. And we tie very closely into infrastructure as a service platforms like Cloud Platform, OpenStack, vCloud Director, and Eucalyptus. But we can also work in environments that don't have an IaaS platform available as well. We can do that through pre-provisioned systems, whether they're virtual machines or bare metal servers. And we can deliver these types of capabilities to your application teams. Focusing on our MongoDB as a service capability, the fundamental premise of this functionality is that we make it trivially easy to provision even very complex Mongo environments. You can hand this capability off to the individual developers responsible for the apps that are consuming Mongo in your organization. You can take the same capability and just use it internally inside your DBA team to automate operations. And then once provisioning is done, of course, CumuLogic doesn't stop there. We continue to maintain those deployed services. And so we'll do things like provide automated backups. We make it very easy to continue to scale up replica sets. We allow for on-demand snapshots, recoveries. You can even upsize individual instances of the Mongo database by creating replicas and then promoting that replica to being read-write. The basic value proposition, if you're an enterprise, of course, we all know that automating tasks that are repetitive is a key to gaining efficiency and reducing risk. Within the MongoDB service, we're automating approximately 75 to 90% of the manual operational tasks. Again, that's both provisioning as well as ongoing lifecycle management of the Mongo systems. And we really empower your developers to deploy databases very quickly. We eliminate a lot of the wait time that might happen if your database management team needs to do manual work to support that end user. And we let the database experts, the operational experts, focus on higher value capabilities or higher value efforts around perhaps tuning the databases or working with the ops teams to make sure that they're taking advantage of the Mongo technology most appropriately. And as I mentioned earlier, we of course run on really any cloud or private infrastructure. So it can be a virtual environment, be a bare metal environment. It could also be an infrastructure as a service platform. On the service provider front, we do have a number of service providers that are also looking at this type of capability as a way to increase consumption of their basic infrastructure services. We make it very easy to deploy this capability in conjunction, again, with many of the infrastructure as a service stacks I referred to. And this particular function allows them to actually have an offering that fits into the same category as Amazon's DynamoDB. And of course, MongoDB being an extremely popular option among developers, that presents a good opportunity to take applications into the CSP that might otherwise have to be rewritten to use Dynamo if they chose to go to Amazon. Specifically, the features of our Mongo service include replica sets for data durability. We can actually manage sharding on behalf of the user for very large-scale deployments. We allow the requester to tune the performance of the Mongo databases. You can do it based on a combination of infrastructure selection as well as specific configuration options that can be pushed down to the engines that might tune it for read-heavy workloads or write-heavy workloads. We also automate failure recovery, so we'll take care of both backup and restoration. We'll also handle an individual node going offline. We'll bring another node back into that replica set and make sure that it's joined up correctly and that replication occurs. Of course, now one of the keys to deploying any database is making sure that the data inside of it is secure, especially in an enterprise environment, confirming that only the apps that should have access to that endpoint can access the endpoint is very critical for compliance reasons. And so we support dealing with the access controls both in terms of users as well as network access controls into the instances. We handle updates and patches, and all of this capability is exposed via both an API, which can be tied to existing development workflow automation that might exist, or we can expose via our self-service interface, which is what Sandeep will actually be demoing today. A couple of basic deployment patterns. If you're familiar with Mongo, obviously, everybody knows that you can deploy a single MongoDB database on a single virtual machine very trivially. Now, of course, the value that CumuLogic adds there is that we can take care of things like monitoring and backup of that engine. However, anytime you move to any level of scale, you immediately want to start adding members of a replica set. CumuLogic can let a user do that on demand with just a couple of clicks, and we'll continue to extend that replica set for you. You can take that same multi-replica solution and actually span it across multiple fault domains. And so in kind of cloud parlance, we could be talking about multiple availability zones. This might be in a more traditional virtualized environment, multiple data centers. And so we allow the end user to actually decide exactly how much availability they need in their deployment. And the applications can be built in such a way that perhaps you're doing geographic load balancing and targeting a particular data center for the web servers. Those web servers can communicate all their write activity to secondary Mongo systems that are very close to it. And we, again, make this very easy to scale this out. Now, things get much more complex, of course, once you start dealing with sharding. And as a Mongo environment grows, very quickly application teams reach the point where they realize they need to implement a sharding strategy. Oftentimes, if you reach that point, there's a significant learning curve that has to occur in terms of operations for the Mongo system itself. What CumuLogic can do for you is actually reduce a lot of that challenge to really just deciding that you want to deploy a set of shards for a particular environment. We'll take care of deploying the query routers, the configuration servers, scaling and growing the individual shards replica sets, and of course continuing to back up and maintain and monitor all of those deployed nodes that make up that more complex environment. And with that, what I'll do is hand off to Sandeep and let him give a demo of the product itself. Sandeep, you should have it. There we go.
Thank you, Chip. Hope you guys can see my screen now. Hello, everyone. I'm Sandeep Patni, co-founder and VP of Systems at CumuLogic. Today in this webinar, I'll walk you through a live demo, and you will see how easy it is to set up and manage MongoDB-as-a-Service with CumuLogic. CumuLogic's NoSQL database service provides a quick and easy way to provision fully managed MongoDB database instances on any cloud, public or private. Users can launch dedicated MongoDB service and optimize it for their particular workload as needed. So let's go ahead and see how we can provision a standalone MongoDB instance first, and then we will walk through multiple complex configurations from there on. So from here, this is the user dashboard. I'm going to switch into NoSQL service. So there are these other service modules which are available. We're going to focus on MongoDB-as-a-Service under this NoSQL. So I'm going to click on details. I can see the details of that service, and then here I have something we call subscriptions. So these subscriptions are pre-packaged configurations you can create for your users, and then developers can just come here and quickly pick up one of these configurations and launch the service. So let's go pick this standalone MongoDB instance from here. So that is going into particular zone, the storage size, and these configuration details are here. So I'm going to click on launch, then provide it a name. So I'm going to call it DemoDB 5, and then launch. Confirm that, and here. That's it. So few clicks, you saw we started provisioning the DemoDB 5 here with that default configuration that was listed there. So here we can see this is in progress. So what is happening under the hood, CumuLogic controller now is going into particular connecting to that underlying IaaS infrastructure, provisioning those resources, the virtual machine, the storage, all that the required components for that service. Then it will go and configure MongoDB, configure backup, monitoring, health agents, all of that 9 yards. And then once the configuration is ready, the status will turn to green from in progress, and we will get details here in the bottom panel. So we will see access details made available to us. Then we will be able to connect to that database service from there. And once the service is up and running, like you can see some of these are here, then CumuLogic will continue to monitor and manage that service. So we will look through some of those management functions as we go. So that was just provisioning a very bare minimum single standalone instance and bringing it up very easy. Now let's take a look how we can provision more complex configurations. So from on the screen here, I'm going to click on launch instance, and then we will walk through some of the other complex configurations here. So I'm going to give it a name. So on any of the screens here in CumuLogic, you will find help information available. You can click on that, and you would get the on-screen help, so that you don't have to go out from here into the manual to get the information. So try to make it very simple for you to being able to provision that. Now let's give it some name. I'm going to call this, let's say, DemoDB 6. Give it some description. So we will be provisioning a shard cluster. So engine is already pre-selected here. Under the type is where we will choose what we want to provision. So let's come to that. I'll leave that as standalone for now. I'm going to walk you through some of the configuration, and then we will see all the configuration options that are available. In the target cloud is where we can choose where I want to deploy this particular service. So I have in my account, as you can see, there are a few targets which are predefined. So I can choose one of these clouds, whether I want to provision that on Amazon or one of the other public clouds, or a dedicated resource pool. So I'm going to pick that here on cloud 2. Then I can choose which zone I want to deploy. So these are all flexible. So it is very flexible for you to choose through all these options. Or if you wanted to go through default, you could just select that and deploy it without having to go through all these configurations. Now in the instance type, you can choose what size of instance you want to provision. So I have here various options. You can see small, medium, large, pre-configured, and I can pick one of them. Tag is where I'm going to tag whether my service is production, development, or testing. So I'm going to call it a production service. And access group is where I'm going to define what access control. So this is the firewall policy. So if I don't define one, a default one is going to get created, and you can always edit that and manage the access control separately from the access group menu. So now, so this is for a standalone setup. Now you can see that I have selected a different target location, the size of the instance, and the type and access control and all that. Here in the bottom section, I can define what database I want to create, a username, password, and a default collection I want created as part of the provisioning. Now, like we said, in the type, I have few configuration options available here. So let's see, I'm going to switch from standalone configuration to a replica set, and then we will see. As you can see here in the standalone configuration, I have a single node being provisioned as it says it's a standalone deployment. I'm going to provision a replica set now, so I'm going to change that to replica set, and we can see the number of nodes have gone up to 3. So that is the default configuration that we need to start with minimum 3 in a replica set. But having 3 nodes in a replica set, making 1 primary and 2 secondary, so MongoDB requires you to have odd number of secondaries replicas available. So in the event of a primary failure, it would be able to elect a primary. So we will add, if you select only 3 nodes as a default configuration, we will be adding 1 arbiter node so that in the event of failure, we can recover safely. Or we can, or you can change that to number of nodes as 4, and then we won't have to provision an arbiter node in that case. So now we have 1 primary and 3 replicas being provisioned. So in the bottom section here, we could continue keeping the username, password, the demo collection, those things which we were configuring for a standalone node. Now let's see if I wanted to provision a shard. So I'm going to go and select here in the type. I'm going to change this to a shard, and then we'll see what configuration options become available to us. So I select that as a shard, and then you can see now I have an additional field called deployment type became available. So I have production and development deployment. Now the basic difference here is, when you are provisioning a shard, there could be various configurations as Chip just showed you earlier. Now, if you wanted to go with a very simple configuration in the development, you can just go with 1 config router, one query router, 1 config server, and a single shard in the configuration. Or for production, you might want to go with a more highly available configuration. So we would be provisioning multiple config servers and query routers and additional shards on that. So when I provision one as a default development, then I can start with minimum 3 nodes. So that's my very small deployment. If I switch that to production, it will automatically switch to 9 nodes here, as you can see, because it will be using 3 query routers, 3 config servers, and we'll be adding 1 shard plus 1 arbiter node in that event. So you can see that there are various configuration options which are available. Now, these configurations options, what you choose will impact the performance and the availability and the data durability of your database. Now, replica sets provide you the high availability and the data durability, while sharding provides you scalability. So you can configure shards on the replica set like we are doing here. That will give you best of both, this reliability as well as scalability. But there is an overhead on sharding and replication, so you should choose what's best suited for your application, but you can see all the options are available to you here. So let's say that we have selected here. Now in the bottom section, now we'll see, since we have selected a shard, we have few additional options available. We can provide a shard key, or whether it's a hash or not, and here we could just say, instead, if we don't want to provide a shard key, we can just say automatically hash on the ID. So once we have selected this information, let's go and say, go to the next screen. Here on this screen, we can provide some additional information, which is we want to fine tune our configuration. So here I have in the performance section, I can provide a parameter group. So parameter group is basically a predefined configuration which you want to apply to your database. So if you don't have one pre-created, you could start with a default configuration, and then you could always apply a specific fine-tuning configuration after the database is up and running. So we can see. So let's start with this parameter group which I have pre-created, and we will go and see how we can edit that when we look at the parameter groups. So I'm going to select the large DB here as a parameter. In the storage and backup section, as the name says, I'm going to specify how much storage I want to start with. Let's say I want to start with 10 gigabytes on this database. And in the backup options, I will choose my backup preferences. So I have choice to select my retention time from the default 1 day. Let's say I wanted to change it to 5 days retention, and then backup start time to be that time. In the maintenance section, similarly, I can choose and specify my maintenance window. So this is the time when, if we are doing any performance tuning, you want to do a automatic database restart at a specific interval, that can be selected from here, and this is the time that will be used. Now, this additional field here in the monitoring, you can see this is for enabling the MMS monitoring here. So we provide integration with MMS. So when you checkbox this, the MMS agents are installed on the specific nodes here, and they will be reporting data back into MMS. You could go into your MMS console and add those nodes for that additional monitoring. Now, as part of the provisioning, I will show you that CumuLogic does provide the system and the performance metrics which are available. But if you wanted to have that additional instrumentation, you could always connect that to MMS, and we provide that integration here. So that's it. So we have gone through all the options that are available here, and now we're going to say finish and confirm we want to provision this. Now we will see here, it's gone on the next screen. So DemoDB 6 that is getting created, and the 10 nodes are selected. The status is in progress. So in the bottom section here, we will be able to follow the progress. So in the events tab is where we will see as the nodes are getting provisioned and it's getting ready for us to use. So let's go back to the other screen here. So we saw that DemoDB 5, which we started provisioning earlier, that got provisioned, and the events tab is where we can see all the details. It went through provisioning. Now this events log is maintained throughout the life of that database. So any errors that are occurring or any activity, any management things, which functions which are implemented, like performance tuning or restarting, that will be logged here, and you'll be able to keep track of that for the life of the database. So now we went through provisioning a standalone instance, and then we also went through provisioning replica sets or a sharded cluster, and as that is getting provisioned, let's take a look at some of the functions which are available. So first things, backup. We talked about at the time of the configuration, we selected some backup configuration there and some backup policies. So the default system defined backup that is running at specific interval. If you wanted to take an ad hoc backup on a given database, so for example, on any of these databases here, so you can go and click on create snapshot, select the database from the list which is available. Let's say I want to take a snapshot of DemoDB 3. I'm going to call this snapshot 3, and I say create. So it will take a point in time snapshot at this point right now on that database. So you can see there I have some snapshots, and this new snapshot 3 is getting created. In the events, we will be able to confirm that created successfully, and it's ready now. So once the snapshots are available, I can manage this snapshot. I could restore from this particular snapshot and create a copy of database. So for example, I'm going to go and say restore from this snapshot. Then I can provide an instance name where I want to deploy this. So let's say, here I have a choice to deploy that into a different zone than where the source was. Also, I can deploy that to a larger size of the virtual machine. So when I wanted to indirectly basically migrate from a smaller instance to a larger instance, I could take a snapshot and restore that to a larger instance and get myself migrated into a new instance. And then when I click on restore, that's going to provision one new instance and create restore it. Once, if you don't want to keep, so if you wanted to clean up the manually taken snapshots, you could go and delete them. The automatic snapshots are automatically cleaned by the system at as the retention time passes on them. Now let's go back to the instances, and let's take a look at some of the additional, the other view which is available onto currently provisioned databases. So for example, I have a shard which is provisioned with the 10 nodes here previously. Events we already looked at. The monitoring data. So like I said, as part of the provisioning, the monitoring agents are installed. They are collecting data and feeding into the controller, and the monitoring information is made available as it goes. So you can, this information will be useful when you're looking at the usage on the database, or you wanted to fine tune something. Click on that lens to get a zoom into view into the particular metric, you could enable, disable particular nodes you want to see and see specific nodes, or you can change the duration to see you wanted to see older data for 4 hours, and you could see what was happening, that it was flat here and then some activity started happening. You could zoom into a particular interval by selecting it into that time and then say look into or zoom further down into that and so on. So these are various things which are available on that monitoring data. So this includes the system as well as the MongoDB specific like page fault, up counter, and some of that parameters which are available. Access details provides you access information for on that. So now you will see here that I have a query router when I wanted to connect to it, or I have so this deployment I have 3 query routers, config servers, and I have 1 shard which is added here. So you can see, and then I can see details of the shard. So this is a shard is added as a replica set. Like since it's my production deployment, I have added that as a replica set. So I can get all that information from here. Now, and some of the other information, which is what databases are created or what collections are existing in that, and what users I have. So this bottom pane provides you a complete view into your database, and you could make use of this information. Now let's take a look at some of the other actions which are available. So let's say that on that shard here, clicking on the action tab, we would see the actions which are available. So I have add collection. Click on add collection, and then I can go and now create and give it some name. Here I could create a new collection, and then similarly now since it's a shard, I can provide a new shard key, or I could just leave it alone for now and then say add collection. So now that collection is getting added. Like I mentioned here in the events tab, we will see the progress that collection added, and then once that is ready for us to access, we would be able to see collections here added into that DB2 now. Let's take a look. I want to add a shard. So right now you can see that I have this, there was only a single shard available added. So I want to go and add additional shard capacity to it. So I want to go and say add a new shard. So that will go and start adding a new shard. So let me just go and create user first, and then we'll go and add shard once it goes into progress. So here I can add a user, and I could add that user onto an existing database, or I could create a new database if I wanted to and provide a user. So I'm going to add user. That user got added to it. So you can see there's various admin functions which you could provide, and then now the users will get added, and you would see the user available here. Now let's go and add a shard to this database and expand it from 10 nodes to the additional capacity we need. So when I click on that, you could see that I'm adding exactly same size of the shard, and you would see that I have, it will start provisioning that. Now it's so now the number of nodes have turned to 14. So once the virtual machines are created and configured, a shard is added and ready for use, this will turn back to green again, and we'll be able to access it. So this is all on shard, where you can grow from, as you can see, you can grow a shard from 10 nodes to 14 nodes just with few clicks here. Similarly, now on the, let's say, standalone instance, we started off provisioning a standalone instance. I want to grow from that standalone to more capacity. I want to convert that standalone into a replica set. So we start off with a small configuration, and now as business grows, the need grows, and you want to add more capacity, you could always grow from that into a replica set and add more capacity to it. I'm just going to click on that and say grow into a replica set. So now we can see there this thing started provisioning additional nodes and convert that standalone into a replica set now. Similarly, as you can add nodes, you could always shrink back. So I have a replica set here with 4 nodes. I have the action available to remove that node. So I could remove capacity, return it back into the cloud, and contain my charges which are happening. Some of the other actions which are available here is self-explanatory. Here you could see you could restart database, you could clone, you can terminate, and modify here. So modify action is specifically for modifying any configuration details. So we can see, for example, here I'm going to go and say modify this database. I can change my backup preferences or just leave it alone. And then remember we talked about parameter groups. So I provision this database without applying any parameters, but I want to now apply and change the configuration and fine-tune this database. So I could apply a different parameter group to this and say apply right now or save. Now if I save it, then the database will get restarted during that next maintenance cycle and the parameters will be applied. Or if I wanted to see the effect right now, I just go and say apply. It will just warn me that it will restart that database, and we will see that the parameter. Now you can see that reporting DB is being displayed here. So these are various management functions, configurations you can do. Quickly want to show you here in the parameter groups, like we saw, we were able to apply and create databases using the parameter groups. I will show you, how do you edit those or create those parameter groups. So here you can see that I have 2 parameter groups created. I can go and create a new parameter group. So creating a parameter group is basically making a copy of default parameters which are exposed. You make a copy of that, and then you can edit that. So let's say that now I have made a copy of the default parameters. I can view into it. So these are various tuning parameters which are available in Mongo. So I have made them available. So let's say that a simple parameter, I want to change the slow query time. So slow MS from the default value is 100, and I want to change this to 150, for example. So that is when a query is marked as slow. And I want to change this and save this configuration. Now, once I have created a parameter group or edited and saved it, I can go back to a existing running instance and say I want to use that parameter group. Click on the modify and choose. Now I have a demo as the parameter group which is available. So this is very simply, you can look at the performance of your database for some time, then you just determine that what you want to fine tune, and you could go and fine tune it. So I'm going to apply this demo and then apply that to the database right now. So here the parameter group is getting added onto that. So in the monitoring section, we saw CumuLogic provides you the monitoring details. So your user can always look at this and then determine what fine tuning they want to do and provision that. Now let's go and take a look and connect to one of these databases and add some data into it. For example, let's go and see, click on the access details, and I'm going to pick up this database and connect from here. I'm going to say Mongo connect into that database, and then I can say show DBs. Then I could use a particular database, and then I can add so if there's any objects in that database. So basically you get access to the database, and then you could use that for connecting to it from your application or from your management to take care of it. Under access group, you can fine tune the access control. So like I said, when you provision that, so this is the firewall policy you could define, you could edit. So these are all defined with the default access group here. As you can see, for the demo, we have kept it open, but you can fine tune that and say edit, add specific port number and open it to a specific CID or IP range, and then you could make use of that. I think we are almost about time here. I'm going to hand it back to Jack for questions, and if there's any more information needed, you could visit us on CumuLogic and get that. So Jack, back to you.
Thank you very much, Sandeep. I appreciate it. I remind all of you, any questions you may have, please post those in the questions pane. We encourage you to ask your questions. That's what we're here for, is to answer your questions. Since we don't have any in the question pane right now, we have a few questions that we'll start with. Chip and Sandeep, the first question, what approach is CumuLogic taking to multi-tenancy in the platform?
That's a good question, Jack. So we talked a lot about how we can work with a number of different infrastructure as a service platforms, or we can work in a virtualized environment, or even just a bare metal environment. The answer kind of depends a little bit on your underlying infrastructure. So the basic premise of CumuLogic is that every node that's deployed, that's part of a Mongo environment, and so that's a specific Mongo engine running as a member of a replica set, or it's a query router. Each one of those nodes is an individual system, be that a virtual machine that's provisioned, or be that a hardware system, hardware-based system that's in a pre-provisioned pool that's allocated. So since each one of those nodes is actually a discrete system, if we're working with an infrastructure as a service platform, what we're actually doing is deploying those VMs on behalf of the user who's making the request for the Mongo system. We do that through allowing the synchronization of API keys between accounts in CumuLogic and accounts in the target cloud. And so we take advantage of a lot of the infrastructure multi-tenancy capabilities there. Now, within our core platform itself, obviously there is a notion of users and accounts. And each one of the accounts that exist within the CumuLogic platform actually has the right to deploy databases kind of on their own, and their ACLs are unique to them. Their parameter groups are unique to them. Now, all these things can be set as defaults by the platform administrator and then simply inherited by each individual account.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chip. Again, I want to encourage all of you, any questions you may have, to post those in the questions pane. Chip, I have another question. What are the infrastructure requirements to make this solution work?
Well, we work with, as I said, infrastructure as a service platforms. We specifically can target the APIs exposed by OpenStack and a couple of very specific distributions. So we work with Nebula, we work with cloud scaling, and we are testing right now with RDO. We also work with Citrix Cloud Platform, Apache Cloud Stack, vCloud Director, as well as Eucalyptus. In addition to that, because we're really focused on consuming the APIs, we can work both in an environment where this is a private cloud running one of those software packages, or any public cloud provider that might be using one of those packages, or in the case of Eucalyptus, we're talking about the Amazon APIs, so we can actually deploy databases out into Amazon. We also are able to work with pre-provisioned systems. These are either virtual machines or bare metal servers that have CentOS pre-installed on them. As long as our controller has network access into them and the appropriate credentials, it's able to take over that system and give it its identity, depending on what role it's going to play in a particular configuration.
Wonderful, Chip. Thank you so much. And we do have a question that came in from Shu. Shu, thank you so much for your question. Chip, you may be able to see it, but I'm going to read it. Does this solution guarantee certain performance, transaction load, and et cetera of the such?
What we do is we operate as a control plane for the provision systems. And so you do have to have a bit of knowledge around how large your environment needs to be in order for you to select the appropriate configuration that's being deployed. But as Sandeep showed, you can actually continue to scale a particular replica set up, or even go from a single node deployment to a multi-node replica set. Within the shard configuration, you can continually add shards as necessary. And so, performance is the type of thing where there's a lot of different angles for how you solve performance or think about performance. Everything from the physical hardware that you're going to be deploying on, the virtualization technology you may be employing, and then, of course, the configuration of Mongo itself. The other thing that Sandeep talked about a bit were the parameter groups, and that's actually an opportunity for experienced MongoDB administrators to help tune the configuration values that are being pushed to the individual nodes. And different examples of that would be tuning a database for a particularly write-intensive application, or perhaps tuning the environment for a very read-intensive, or somewhere in between. So the way we think about performance is that the platform itself doesn't guarantee the performance. What we do is we give you the tools necessary as either an end user or as an administrator to provide best practices to all of your end users to configure for a number of different performance characteristics, depending on what your application needs are.
Thank you, Chip, for answering that question. Shu, thank you for your question. I do see that you have another one. Here we go. How can we estimate the cost of using this solution?
That's a really good question. So what CumuLogic does, especially in a enterprise environment, is that we sell an annual right-to-use license. You can contact us at info@cumulogic.com in order to get into a conversation about pricing of our software. Now, obviously, a lot of this will depend, of course, on pre-existing infrastructure capacity that you might have available. That will weigh in to the costs themselves. But the other angle of thinking about total cost of ownership is really the amount of time that's being saved for your teams, whether they're the DBA teams or systems administrators that might be asked to manually spin up VMs. And we do have a database savings calculator that we've done specific to our relational database capability. Because we support engines like Percona and MySQL on the relational side in a very similar way to what we're doing with MongoDB. And that's something you might want to take a look at on our website. Some of the basic premises behind that calculator really do apply to any of these back-end data technologies, right? There's a lot of work that goes into properly deploying consistently, as well as ongoing maintenance of any database that's being used in your organization. So, by automating, you're reducing a lot of the time and effort. You're also increasing the capacity of your DBA teams to focus on higher value efforts, like again, best practices being pushed out to the app teams, and by increasing the capacity and throughput of your IT operations, you're really making sure that your business isn't being blocked by workflow problems that might occur, right? So any points of contention in your workflow, you allow the application teams to really focus on what their business users need, get access to the back-end services that are necessary for their app to be deployed smoothly and quickly, and you should see a significant return there.
Two very good questions. Thank you very much for asking. We encourage anyone else that has any questions, please go ahead and post them in the question pane. Chip, you just mentioned it sounded like CumuLogic has back-end support for multiple database products and instances. Could you please tell us what other databases are supported by CumuLogic?
Absolutely. So in the NoSQL space, we support MongoDB, obviously, and that's what the purpose of this webinar is. But we have very similar support for Couchbase in the NoSQL side. And then in the relational database world, we support both MySQL as well as the Percona ExtraDB engine. We can do similarly complex deployments of Percona engine backend databases. If you're not familiar with Percona, think of it as kind of a drop-in replacement for MySQL itself. It allows for very easy replication and clustering. And so we can do many of the things that you saw in the demo today for Percona. In addition to back-end data services, we actually offer messaging as a service, which includes support for RabbitMQ as well as IBM WebSphere MQ. We support a load balancer capability, which allows you to balance your web traffic. We can handle deployment of some application workloads depending on frameworks, the frameworks and engines that are necessary, things like Tomcat and the Spring framework, or Python and Django applications. We do cache clusters, so Memcached clusters. So you can see we have a large number of as-a-service functions that come with our core platform. And when you license the CumuLogic platform, you may choose to only expose a subset, depending on what standards you might have in your organization. But the licensing allows you to take advantage of everything that I just described.
And
Thank
also,
you, Chip. I do notice that Ricky has asked a question as well. Oh, I'm sorry. Was there additional comment? My apologies.
Yeah. So, Jack, I just wanted to add to that. In addition to the current engines which are available, we are also adding support for Oracle and MS SQL towards the end of summer. So we would have those additional database engines available in the SQL side. And also on the NoSQL side, we're looking at Cassandra and some of the other engines, so those will be added. So that portfolio of number of engines, type of databases supported is growing as we are adding more components to it.
Thank you so much, Sandy, for the additional details. We do have Ricky that's asked a question. Ricky, thank you so much for posting your question. It is, what other services are you planning to offer? And Ricky notes specifically, he noticed the load balancing as a service solution. So I think Ricky is specifically referring to outside of the database as a service, MongoDB-as-a-Service, database-as-a-service service offerings.
So like Chip mentioned, right, so we do have a database service as we saw here. So we do have load balancer as a service. We do have messaging. So there are RabbitMQ and IBM WebSphere available there. And in addition to that, we have a framework as a service, which is basically a building block for our application web stack we have, where you can deploy your Java, PHP, Python, Django, and other applications. In the summertime, in our next release, we are coming up with DevOpsWorks, which is similar to what, if you're familiar with Amazon OpsWorks. So we have DevOpsWorks, which will be making use of that framework as a service, where we have various frameworks supported. We have Java, PHP, Python, Django, and so on. And then in addition to that, we also have a very basic compute as a service. So you can interface that with your underlying IaaS infrastructure and be able to provision just plain vanilla virtual machine using that compute service. So these are various services which are available right now. And towards maybe fall time frame, we are also coming out with a framework which would be available, where you would be able to add your own custom as a service module using that framework.
Thank you, Sandy. I think Ricky has indicated that did answer his question. Ricky, we thank you for your question. With that, we're going to move to close. So we want to thank everyone for their investment and time in joining us today. Tell me more about custom as a service. So Ricky did want to explore the custom development of a service offering, Sandeep, that I think you just closed on. If you could explain that a little bit more for Ricky, I think he would appreciate that.
Absolutely. So as you see on our dashboard, you saw the current offer service modules which are available. So what we are doing is so this is in the basic architecture. If you see, these are all created as modules, and then there's a core framework where these plug into, so that CumuLogic platform can connect into underlying IaaS infrastructure and orchestrate provisioning of those services. So what we are working on right now is creating that framework, the SDK available, where you would be able to create something as a service which you provide to your customers today. You would be able to comply with the configuration requirement in that SDK, and being able to add that. So what you would see on the dashboard, you would see your as a service module available. For example, let's say that today, you saw there's messaging as a service is available, and then let's say that you have something else, some other custom application you provide for your users, that as a service. Let's say just name, let's say DNS as a service, for example. If you wanted to add that, then you would be able to follow the documented guidelines in the SDK and be able to add that as a service. Chip, feel free to add any more details to that.
No, I think you covered that pretty well. So just boiling it down, right? It's an SDK. It's going to be released later this year. That SDK lets you expand on our core platform in two directions. One is additional as-a-service modules, higher level modules like NoSQL or relational databases. And then more specifically, within an existing module, you'll be able to add additional engines. So if you had a NoSQL database type that we don't currently support, and you had our platform in place, you'd be able to extend the platform to add that different type of NoSQL database. Let's say, for example, Cassandra. You could write to our APIs and provide us with the automation hooks necessary to drive your plugin.
Wonderful, wonderful. And one last question by Ricky on this topic. And so CumuLogic would take care of the orchestration of that, and we'd be setting up the bootstrap parameters.
Yes. Yes. So,
that's correct.
There will be specific requirement, like the Chip mentioned. For example, if you wanted to add Cassandra as a service, in addition to, let's say, what NoSQL databases we provide, then it would be up to you to have the basic provisioning and management or the configuration requirement for Cassandra available, and that would fit into that framework. And CumuLogic would just be calling those, let's say, those recipes or scripts to be able to configure that in that case. So currently, for example, when we do MongoDB, we take care of doing the configuration. So any of the supported models you have today, those are taken care by CumuLogic. Now, if you are adding your own as a service, onus would be on you to make sure that the configuration information required for that service is available in the format that CumuLogic can consume.
Thank you. We thank you all for these questions. They were great questions. Chip and Sandeep, thank you for your time in answering them. We want to thank everybody for their investment of time joining us today. It's greatly appreciated. As a reminder, you will receive an email with the link of today's presentation within 24 hours. We'd love to connect with you and carry on any of these conversations. If you'd like to carry on some additional conversations, you can email us at info@cumulogic.com. On behalf of our presenters and everyone here at CumuLogic, have a great day or a great evening, depending upon where in the world you are. We thank you very much again, and goodbye.
Thank you.